For as long as history has been written, the story of the Americas began late. It was a land painted as untouched, waiting. A blank page waiting for civilization to arrive from somewhere else. Egypt had its pharaohs, Mesopotamia its cities, Europe its kings. But the Americas, we were told, were the wilderness, ancient only in silence. That story was neat, elegant, easy to believe. It gave the world an order. But the earth doesn't follow orders, and history, when you listen closely, has a different rhythm. Beneath our feet lie traces that refuse to fit the timeline, tools, ruins, and bones that whisper of civilizations far older than we've been allowed to imagine. In deserts where the wind never rests, and jungles that swallow everything man builds, archaeologists have begun uncovering fragments of a forgotten dawn, fragments of cities that predate Egypt, pottery older than the pyramids, footprints pressed into ancient clay long before the first European stone was ever carved. Each one is a reminder that the story we were given might have begun somewhere else, and much earlier. But how did this misremembering begin? Why did history close its eyes to a continent's past? For centuries, exploration was written by those who arrived late. When the first chroniclers from across the sea stepped onto these lands, they saw not what was here, but what they wanted to see. They measured the world through their own lens, deciding which ruins were civilized and which were primitive. In doing so, they didn't just conquer land, they conquered memory. The truth is, civilization doesn't rise in one place and spread like a contagion. It blooms where conditions and imagination allow it. And in the ancient Americas, imagination flourished. Long before written history, people here were building cities aligned with stars, carving gods into stone, mapping the heavens with astonishing precision. Many of these early civilizations vanished before history learned their names. Others left behind echoes, architectural ideas, mathematical patterns, mythologies that resurface centuries later in the great cultures of the Maya, the Inca, and the Aztec. It's as if the continent itself was remembering, reawakening piece by piece. Every new discovery forces us to redraw the map of time. A forgotten city in the Peruvian desert, a tool buried deep in the soil of Mexico, a mound in North America that predates Stonehenge. Together, they form a pattern, one that suggests civilization didn't begin here in the shadow of others, but alongside them. And so, the question becomes not when people came to the Americas, but how long they've been here. How many of their stories lie hidden beneath the soil we walk on every day? How many chapters were torn from history's book before it was even written? Maybe the beginning we thought we knew, the neat, chronological, classroom version of human progress, is only a fragment of something much greater. Because history doesn't vanish, it gets buried. It sleeps beneath the layers of time, waiting for someone curious enough to uncover it. And perhaps, just beyond the reach of our accepted timelines, an older story is still waiting to be told, a story that belongs not to conquerors, but to the earth itself. For over a century, we were certain of one thing, that the first humans arrived in the Americas around 13,000 years ago. They crossed a land bridge from Siberia to Alaska, following herds through the ice, and spread slowly southward. It was a simple, elegant story, one that fit neatly within the boxes of history, but time has a way of breaking the boxes we build for it. Across this vast continent, evidence has begun to surface that doesn't fit the script. It started quietly. A fragment here, a footprint there, each one small, but together they began to crack the timeline open. In southern Chile, where the wind moves cold across the peat bogs, lies Monte Verde, a site that should not exist. When archaeologists first uncovered traces of wooden shelters, stone tools, and the remains of ancient fires, they expected them to belong to the Clovis era, that first wave of human settlement. But the radiocarbon dates said otherwise. The camp was nearly 18,000 years old, thousands of years before the supposed arrival of the first Americans.
At first, disbelief followed. Critics said the data was wrong, the site contaminated, the evidence mistaken. But the proof endured, and Monteverde refused to be explained away. Then came Pedra Furada, deep in the cliffs of northeastern Brazil, another place that defied expectation. Here, scientists uncovered hundreds of stone flakes, charred hearths, and rock shelters filled with signs of life. Some of these artifacts, when dated, suggested human presence as far back as 30,000 years ago. That number alone sent shockwaves through archaeology. Could people really have lived here that long ago? Or were these marks the work of nature, mistaken for human hands? The debate still burns, but one truth remains. The earth does not make tools that sharp, or fires that deliberate. And then, in the dunes of White S, Andes, New Mexico, the silence of prehistory was broken once more. In a dry lakebed, scientists discovered footprints, not fossils, but impressions left in ancient mud, now hardened to stone. There were dozens of them, perfectly preserved. Men, women, children, walking together beside the tracks of mammoths and giant ground sloths. Some prints showed children running, others a mother carrying her child. And when the layers were dated, they revealed something extraordinary. These footprints were 23,000 years old. Humans had been here, living ordinary lives, long before the ice bridge even formed. With each discovery, the certainty of our story erodes a little more. Monteverde, Pedra Furada, White Sands, each one a fracture in the timeline, a reminder that history isn't a straight line, but a web, tangled and vast. The people who walked here were not accidental wanderers. They were explorers, artists, survivors, capable of crossing oceans or finding paths through worlds we thought impassable. If they came so early, then how? By sea, following ancient coastlines now swallowed by the ocean, or by routes long erased beneath glaciers and floods? We may never know for sure. But what we can say is that the Americas were never empty. They were ancient long before our books dared to call them young. History is beginning to whisper a different story, one where humanity reached across oceans of time far sooner than we believed, one where the first footsteps on this land are not just traces of migration, but evidence of memory, endurance, and the boundless curiosity that defines us. Because sometimes the truth doesn't rewrite history. It simply reminds us that history was never finished being written. Time is the language of history. We measure it in centuries and civilizations, believing that if we can date something, a bone, a fragment of charcoal, a piece of cloth, we can understand where it belongs in the grand story of us. Archaeology depends on that belief. It needs a clock, something to turn soil into sequence, to tell us when a life was lived, when a fire was lit, when a civilization began to dream. For decades, that clock has been radiocarbon dating. The science seems elegant, even poetic. Every living thing absorbs carbon while it's alive. Among those atoms is an unstable form, carbon-14, created high in the atmosphere by cosmic rays. When life ends, the absorption stops. The carbon-14 begins to decay, its invisible clock ticking down through centuries. By measuring what remains, scientists can estimate how long ago that life ended. In theory, it's flawless, a perfect bridge between chemistry and history. But like every clock, it drifts. The Earth doesn't keep steady time. Solar storms, volcanic eruptions, fluctuations in the planet's magnetic field, all of these can alter the amount of carbon-14 in the air. What looks precise on paper becomes blurred in reality. A tree burned by an ancient fire could appear thousands of years younger or older than it truly is. One small imbalance in the sky, and the whole rhythm of time begins to falter. Throughout archaeology, quiet controversies have followed in the shadow of that uncertainty. When radiocarbon dating first began, It was treated as infallible, the ultimate truth-teller. But then came anomalies. Some samples refused to match the history around them. Others dated so far back they seemed impossible. In Mexico's Hueyatlaco site, tools were found beside animal bones that dated to nearly 250,000 years ago, long before modern humans were believed to exist here. Scientists dismissed it immediately. They said the samples were contaminated, that the results were wrong. In Pedra Furada, Brazil, stone tools were dated tens of thousands of years before the accepted timeline, again dismissed, because the dates didn't fit what history allowed. The problem wasn't always in the data. Sometimes, it was in our own unwillingness to listen. When the results contradicted belief, belief often won. Because science doesn't just measure the world, it measures what we're ready to accept. But the Earth doesn't care what we accept. Its layers keep their own secrets, waiting for someone patient enough to understand their rhythm. And as calibration improves, as new methods refine old mistakes, we're learning that many of those impossible dates may not have been wrong after all. The clock wasn't broken. We were reading it too narrowly. If radiocarbon dating can drift, then what else can? The timelines we teach, the migrations we think we understand, even the birth of civilization itself, all of it begins to blur at the edges. History stops being a staircase and becomes a spiral, looping back upon itself, hinting at worlds older than we've dared to imagine. There's something strangely beautiful about that uncertainty, that even in the age of precision, time still resists being tamed. It reminds us that truth isn't fragile because it's weak, but because it's alive. It shifts, breathes, hides, waiting for us to catch up. Maybe one day we'll build a better clock, one that measures not just decay, but memory, not just time, but understanding. Until then, the Earth continues to whisper the same message through every buried artifact. The past is not as far away as we think. Beneath our feet, the Earth remembers everything. It keeps its memories buried in layers, centuries pressed into soil, the weight of ages held beneath quiet ground. Every stone, every fragment, every grain of dust is a record of something that once lived, once breathed, once dreamed. For generations, we've looked to monuments and temples to understand our past. But the true story of humanity often lies deeper, in the footprints of the forgotten, in the ashes of a single fire, in the curve of a broken tool left behind by hands that never imagined they'd be found. Across the Americas, these whispers are rising from the soil, one discovery at a time. In the desert sands, in mountain caves, and deep within ancient riverbeds, evidence is surfacing that people walked these lands tens of thousands of years before history gave them permission to exist. At Topper, South Carolina, the banks of an ancient river revealed something astonishing. Layers of stone tools buried beneath the known Clovis horizon, the layer archaeologists long believed marked the first Americans. These tools, sharper and simpler, lay deeper still, suggesting a culture far older, perhaps 50,000 years in the past. The discovery sparked debate, even disbelief. How could people have lived here so early? Yet the tools remained, carved by hands both skilled and deliberate, whispering a truth the timeline had forgotten. Further south, in Brazil's Pedra Furada, more evidence emerged. Hearths of ancient fires, flecks of charcoal, and painted cave walls blackened by smoke older than civilization itself. Whoever these people were, they weren't wanderers lost in a new world. They were residents, shaping stone, making art, surviving long before the world knew their name. And in the valleys of New Mexico's white sands, the ground itself began to speak. There, preserved in ancient mud, scientists found the footprints of a vanished people, men, women, and children walking beside the ghosts of mammoths and giant sloths. Some prints show children running,
others the soft imprint of a hand pressed into wet earth. They are the most human of records, and when dated, they revealed something history had long denied. People walked here 23,000 years ago. Each footprint, each tool, each layer of ash is a voice, and together they form a quiet chorus beneath the noise of certainty. They tell us that the Americas were not empty lands waiting for explorers. They were home. Home to people who hunted, built, and dreamed long before the written world began. The earth never lies. It doesn't erase. It only buries. And as we dig deeper into its memory, we find that the story of human arrival isn't a single moment, but a continuum, a slow unfolding across tens of thousands of years. Perhaps the reason we struggle to accept this truth is because it humbles us. It reminds us that civilization wasn't a straight ascent from ignorance to knowledge, but a constant rise and fall, a rhythm as natural as the tides. For every empire that built upward, another fell and was forgotten, leaving only the faintest trace for the future to rediscover. The soil is patient. It holds what we lose, it keeps what we forget, and when we finally listen, it speaks, softly, steadily, truthfully. Because beneath every field, every forest, every riverbank, the earth is still whispering, telling us that the first people to walk these lands did so not as strangers, but as those returning home. In the heart of Peru's Supi Valley, where the desert meets the river and silence stretches endlessly across the dunes, something ancient sleeps beneath the dust. For centuries the wind has passed over this land, carrying nothing but sand and memory. But hidden within that silence is the faint outline of a dream, a city older than Egypt, older than the pyramids, and unlike any that would come after it. This is Caral, the first great city of the Americas, a civilization built not on conquest or war, but on harmony. For thousands of years, it lay forgotten beneath the desert, its temples buried, its plazas erased by time. And yet, when archaeologists uncovered it in the late 20th century, they found something extraordinary, a city that seemed less like a ruin and more like a revelation. The people of Caral appeared over 5,000 years ago, rising from the river valley with no trace of armies, no walls, no weapons. Instead, they built vast pyramids of stone and earth, temples aligned to the movements of the stars. They constructed circular plazas where sound carried perfectly, suggesting a culture that valued communication, music, and unity. Their society was organized, elegant, and peaceful. In a world where most civilizations were born from survival and war, Caral was born from cooperation. The desert that surrounds Caral feels timeless, an ocean of gold and silence. And in the center of it all, these ancient pyramids rise like frozen waves. Their steps are weathered, their edges softened by centuries, but their symmetry remains. From above, the city forms a perfect design, a geometric harmony that mirrors the cosmos itself. It is as though the people of Caral understood that architecture wasn't just shelter, it was expression, mathematics turned to prayer. Among the ruins, archaeologists found instruments, flutes carved from the bones of condors and pelicans, carefully tuned to specific tones. In those hollow reeds, music once echoed through the valley, perhaps during ceremonies beneath the stars. Theirs was a culture that understood sound, vibration, and the balance between earth and sky. Even their trade reflected this harmony. They exchanged textiles, food, and precious shells with coastal peoples hundreds of miles away, not through conquest, but through connection. No signs of warfare were found here, no fortresses, no scars of battle. Caral thrived on peace, art, and science, proof that civilization doesn't have to be born from blood. And yet, like all great civilizations, it eventually fell silent. The river shifted, the desert encroached, and Caral was slowly swallowed by time. The people moved on, their memory carried forward only in fragments, echoes that may have inspired the civilizations that followed, the Chavin, the Moche, the Inca.
Today, when you stand among the ruins of Caral, the air feels different, heavy, but not lifeless. The wind hums through the stone corridors, carrying a rhythm that feels ancient and deliberate. It's as if the city itself remembers the music that once filled its plazas. The sun descends over the pyramids, casting long shadows across the desert, and for a moment the silence feels alive, a heartbeat of something sacred still pulsing beneath the dust. Caral reminds us of something we've almost forgotten, that human greatness doesn't always come from conquest, but from creation. That peace, knowledge, and beauty can be as powerful as war and empire. Perhaps that's why the city still endures, because some dreams are too pure to vanish completely. They linger, waiting to be rediscovered, to remind us of what humanity once was, and what it could be again.
In the steamy lowlands of southern Mexico, where the air hums with insects and the canopy drips with rain, the jungle hides its secrets well. Beneath the tangled roots and moss-covered earth, the ground is heavy with history, not the kind written in books, but the kind carved in stone. And among the vines and shadows, their faces appear, vast, solemn, and silent. They are the Olmec heads, each one a giant monument to a people who vanished thousands of years ago, leaving behind only these enigmatic expressions. Some rise higher than a man. Others are so massive that even in ruin they command the landscape. Their features are human, yet somehow beyond human. Broad noses, full lips, curved brows, eyes that seem to see through centuries. They do not speak, but they do not need to. Their silence is their language. The Olmec civilization emerged around 3,500 years ago, long before the Maya, long before the Aztecs. They are called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the first to shape cities, to sculpt gods, to measure time by the movement of the stars. Their world stretched across the Gulf Coast, from San Lorenzo to La Venta, and the forests that now seem eternal once echoed with their life, the sound of chisels on stone, of water running through canals, of rituals performed beneath towering temples. To understand the Olmec, you have to step into the rhythm of the jungle itself. The air is thick, almost alive, and every sound feels like an echo from the past. The ground gives way to plazas long buried, altars half swallowed by roots, fragments of sculptures that hint at forgotten stories. This was a culture that spoke in symbols, jaguars, serpents, and beings that blurred the line between human and divine. To them, the world was not divided between earth and sky, but woven together, spirit and matter flowing as one. And then there are the faces, those colossal heads that define them. Each was carved from volcanic basalt, brought from mountains miles away, transported somehow through swamps and rivers without wheels, without beasts of burden, without iron or steel. The precision of their craftsmanship defies understanding. Every head is unique, as if each one represents an individual, perhaps rulers, warriors, or gods. Yet even after centuries of study, no one truly knows who they are. The Olmec left no written record that we can read, no clear explanation for their disappearance. What remains are their creations. Cities aligned with celestial patterns, altars shaped like doorways to other realms, and art that seems to belong to a dream half-remembered. They understood geometry, proportion, and design with a mastery that feels almost modern. Their civilization flourished for more than 1,000 years before fading into mystery. The jungles returned, reclaiming everything they built. Their temples collapsed beneath vines, their plazas filled with soil, and their gods sank back into the earth. But the faces remained. Even as centuries passed and empires rose and fell, the stone eyes of the Olmec continued to watch the horizon, guardians of a memory too powerful to die. Today, when the light cuts through the canopy and touches one of those colossal faces,
You can almost feel their presence. It's as if the Olmec are still here, not gone, but waiting, their legacy woven into the DNA of every civilization that followed. The Olmec were not the beginning of the story. They were the spark that lit it. And in the depths of the jungle, where their faces still meet the morning sun, you can feel the pulse of that first flame, the heartbeat of the builders who shaped the soul of Mesoamerica.
In the depths of the Mesoamerican jungle, where mist drifts like memory and the air tastes of earth and rain, there lies a field of giants. They do not move, they do not speak, and yet their presence is undeniable. Carved from volcanic stone, their faces emerge from the soil as if the land itself were remembering what time tried to forget. These are the colossal heads of the Olmec, 20 silent sentinels scattered across ancient river valleys. Their expressions are calm, but not lifeless. They hold something in their gaze, the weight of sorrow, the quietness of knowledge, the reflection of a people who once understood the world in ways we can only guess. Each face is different. Some look proud, others mournful. Some wear helmets that hint at warriors or priests, while others seem too human, too personal to be gods. Their craftsmanship is astonishing. Smooth contours, deep features, symmetry carved with a precision that feels almost impossible for a civilization so ancient. These were not crude attempts at art. They were masterpieces of purpose. Whoever carved them understood not only stone, but emotion. For generations, archaeologists have debated who the Olmec were. Were they the first great architects of the Americas, or inheritors of something older still? Their technology and art appear suddenly, complex, refined, and fully realized, as though born from memory rather than invention. There is no clear path leading up to it, no simpler forms, no gradual evolution, just a beginning that feels more like a continuation of something lost. Some have wondered if the Olmec were guided by an earlier people, perhaps one erased by time or cataclysm, an echo of a forgotten age that left behind no trace except knowledge. It's a theory dismissed by many, yet when you stand before one of these faces, staring into those stone-carved eyes, you can't help but wonder. Their features, so human yet so timeless, seem to belong to more than one world. The Olmec did not write their history in books or scrolls, they wrote it in stone. Their art speaks of transformation, humans merging with jaguars, rulers becoming gods, spirits walking between worlds. To them, existence wasn't divided between the physical and the divine. It was one seamless fabric, and their sculptures were the threads that bound it together. Perhaps these colossal faces were guardians, protectors of sacred places, keepers of ancestral memory. Or perhaps they were witnesses, carved to endure long after flesh and blood had turned to dust. When the jungle reclaimed their cities, it buried these guardians slowly, lovingly. For centuries they slept beneath layers of soil, their faces pressed against the earth like memories dreaming in silence. When the first of them was unearthed in the 19th century, it stunned the world. The sheer scale of it, 20 tons of stone carved by a people with no metal tools, no wheels, no beasts of burden, defied logic. Even today, we don't fully understand how they moved them, or why they built them where they did. But maybe we're not meant to. Maybe understanding isn't the point. Because when you stand before these faces, time itself seems to stop. You feel the centuries pressing in, the weight of lives lived and lost, of civilizations rising and falling, of memory resisting the pull of oblivion. These faces are not just art. They are the embodiment of endurance. They watch us from across millennia, not accusing, not pleading, simply remembering. The Olmec are gone. Their cities are ruins. Their language has turned to dust. But their eyes remain open, still gazing toward the horizon, still waiting for us to finally look back. High in the Bolivian Andes, more than 12,000 feet above sea level, where the air is thin and the sunlight feels ancient, lies a city carved from mystery. Tiwanaku. Here, amid the winds that sweep across the Altiplano, the ruins stand silent, yet defiant. Their stones are not the crude blocks of primitive builders. They are puzzles of geometry, each one fitting into the next with an accuracy that seems almost beyond time itself. At first glance, Tiwanaku looks like the remnants of a lost world. Temples half buried, monoliths cracked and scattered, stones eroded by centuries of storms. But when you look closer, something extraordinary emerges. The surfaces of these blocks are cut so precisely that even a sheet of paper cannot slide between them. Their angles are perfect, their joints seamless, as though shaped by tools that shouldn't have existed thousands of years ago. The Gateway of the Sun, the most iconic monument of Tiwanaku, stands as both portal and riddle. Carved from a single slab of andesite weighing over 10 tons, its face is etched with intricate patterns, symbols of the sun, the stars, and a god who seems to gaze across eternity. Every mark appears deliberate, mathematical, as though the builders were not just architects, but astronomers and philosophers speaking through stone. To this day, no one fully understands how Tiwanaku was built. The site predates the Inca by over 1,000 years, and yet even they spoke of it with reverence, calling it the work of the gods. Some of the stones, transported from quarries miles away, weigh as much as a passenger jet. How were they moved? Ropes and manpower seemed too simple. Wheels were unknown, beasts of burden scarce, and the terrain unforgiving. It's as if the builders possessed a knowledge we've since forgotten, a deep, intuitive command of balance, leverage, and design. But beyond its engineering, Tiwanaku radiates intention. Its layout aligns with the solstices and the cycles of the heavens. The structures seem to mirror the cosmos, forming a dialogue between earth and sky. When sunlight passes through certain gateways on the exact day of the equinox, shadows trace patterns across the stone that may have once marked the turning of seasons, or the calendar of the gods themselves. Archaeologists call Tiwanaku a ceremonial center, but the word feels too small. This was not merely a place of worship, it was a temple of knowledge. The precision of its construction suggests a people who saw the universe as a system of order, where numbers, stars, and stone all spoke the same language. And yet, for all its perfection, Tiwanaku fell. The people vanished, the rituals ceased, and the city was swallowed by silence. Some say drought ended them. Others whisper that the world changed, that Tiwanaku belonged to a time when the earth itself was different, and when that balance was broken, the city lost its meaning. Still, the stones remain, scattered yet unyielding, their edges still sharp after 1,000 years of wind. They seem less like ruins and more like messages. Each cut, each alignment, each flawless angle, a fragment of a lost conversation between humanity and something greater. Perhaps the builders of Tiwanaku were not gods, but something even more remarkable. Humans who once spoke the language of the universe and carved its rhythm into the mountains. And though the world has forgotten their words, their message endures in silence, written not on paper, but in stone. At the edge of the Bolivian Altiplano, just beyond the shadow of Tiwanaku, lies a place that defies explanation: Pumapunku, the Gate of the Puma. Here, scattered across the high plains, lie stones so precise, so impossibly engineered, that even today they seem less carved by hand than manufactured by some ancient precision. The wind that moves through Pumapunku feels different, colder, older, as though it carries the memory of another age. The stones lie shattered now, their once mighty structures collapsed into ruin, yet their surfaces still gleam with the sharpness of intention. They are made from andesite and red sandstone, some weighing over 100 tons, and each block bears cuts, grooves, and interlocking joints so exact They might as well have been designed by a machinist. Walk among them, and you'll see the unmistakable signs of mastery. Perfect 90-degree angles, polished faces smoother than glass, holes drilled straight through stone with millimetric precision. Modern engineers who study them struggle to understand how such work could have been done thousands of years ago, with no iron tools, no steel, no wheels. To replicate it today would require advanced machinery. And yet here it stands, ancient, silent, and undeniable. Pumapunku is not just architecture, it is language, geometry speaking through stone. Its design hints at modular construction, as if the builders understood principles of engineering that would not reappear for millennia. The blocks interlock like pieces of a puzzle, forming what may once have been a vast platform or gateway aligned to the stars. The symmetry is flawless, the proportions mathematical. Nothing here feels random. Every cut seems purposeful, almost coded. Some archaeologists believe Pumapunku was once part of Tiwanaku's ceremonial heart, a sacred space where the people communed with their gods, but others suspect something deeper. The precision, the symmetry, the way the stones fit together with microscopic accuracy. It feels less like worship and more like design, as though this was not just a temple, but a machine. When you stand among the ruins, surrounded by mountains and silence, the feeling is hard to describe. It's not simply awe, it's dissonance, the sense that you're looking at something that doesn't belong to its own era. These stones don't just defy time, they question it. How were they moved? Some weigh more than 100 tons and came from quarries miles away. Even with modern cranes, transporting them would be a challenge. Yet these ancient builders lifted, aligned, and placed them with the precision of engineers. It's as if the knowledge that built Pumapunku was not invented here, but remembered, a fragment of an older understanding passed down through generations until it vanished. And then came the collapse. The city fell silent, the people disappeared, and the structures crumbled beneath the sky. Earthquakes, floods, or something more mysterious. No one knows for sure. What remains are the stones, scattered but unbroken, their surfaces still whispering of a knowledge that once existed and was lost. Pumapunku feels less like a ruin and more like a question. Each block is a word, each angle a sentence. Together forming a story humanity has forgotten how to read. Maybe the builders weren't gods, as the legends say. Maybe they were people like us, reaching for understanding, touching something profound, and leaving behind a record carved in permanence. And as the sun sets behind the Andes, the stones turn golden, their shadows long and deliberate, like the hands of time itself, pointing toward an answer we're still not ready to see. Still not. Deep within the northern jungles of Guatemala, where mist curls through ancient trees and the air vibrates with the hum of unseen life, lies a city swallowed by time. The locals call it El Mirador, the lookout. But to stand here surrounded by endless rainforest is to realize the name doesn't just describe a place. It describes a memory. For centuries, this vast city lay hidden beneath the canopy, an empire of stone and silence buried under roots, vines, and centuries of soil. Only the howler monkeys and the steady rhythm of rain kept it company. But once, El Mirador was alive. Not just a settlement, but the beating heart of the Maya world, a city so immense and advanced that it reshaped the definition of civilization itself. Archaeologists describe El Mirador as the cradle of Maya civilization. Long before the famous cities of Tikal or Palenque rose to power, El Mirador stood as their ancestor, a metropolis of monumental pyramids, elevated causeways, and temples that pierced the horizon. At its height, it was home to tens of thousands of people, surrounded by farmland, reservoirs, and trade routes that reached across the lowlands. But standing here today,
It's almost impossible to imagine. The jungle has reclaimed it completely. The largest pyramid, La Danta, looks less like a man-made structure and more like a forested mountain, rising nearly 230 feet from the earth, one of the largest pyramids ever built on this planet. Yet beneath the roots and moss, it is pure architecture, tier upon tier of stone laid with mathematical precision, facing the cardinal directions, aligned to the rising of the sun. As the archaeologists dig, the city slowly breathes again. Plazas emerge, roads reappear, murals shimmer in the dim light, painted with pigments still bright after 2,000 years. They tell stories of gods, kings, and myths, of a people who mastered both the art, heavens and the earth. The Maya of El Mirador were astronomers, engineers, and artists, their understanding of geometry and celestial motion rivaling anything the old world had achieved. And yet, despite their brilliance, El Mirador fell, not in battle, but through exhaustion. The forests that fed them were cut down to fuel their growth. The soil eroded, the rivers ran dry, and as the balance tipped, the great city that once ruled the jungle was consumed by it. Nature closed over it like a wound, hiding its scars beneath layers of green. What's remarkable is not just that El Mirador existed, but how much it challenges the way we think about time. It reminds us that the rise of civilization was not a single story told from east to west, but a mosaic of human genius spread across the world. While Egypt built pyramids on the Nile, the Maya were doing the same in the heart of the Americas, aligning their monuments to the stars, mapping the cosmos through their architecture. Now, as technology reveals the hidden patterns beneath the forest, with LiDAR scanning uncovering entire networks of cities once connected by ancient roads, El Mirador is awakening again. What was once forgotten is becoming known, and the story of the Maya is expanding beyond imagination. Standing atop La Danta, the jungle stretches endlessly in every direction, a green ocean hiding the bones of empires. The air is heavy with heat and memory. The cries of the jungle rise and fall like the breath of time itself. And in that sound, in the rustle of leaves, the distant thunder, the whisper of wind over stone, you can almost hear them. The voices of a civilization that refused to vanish, waiting to be remembered. In the deep jungles of Central America, the Maya built more than cities. They built time. Where others carved kingdoms into stone, the Maya carved eternity into numbers, stars, and glyphs. To them, time was not an invisible current flowing forward. It was a living being, a cycle, a heartbeat, a god that could be understood, recorded, and spoken to. Their temples and observatories were not just places of worship. They were instruments, precise, deliberate, aligned to the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets. From the summits of Tikal and Copan, Maya astronomer priests looked to the heavens, tracing patterns in the night sky and turning them into calendars so accurate they still humble modern science. The Maya calendar was not one, but many, interlocking gears of cosmic understanding. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred cycle, governed ritual life and human destiny. The Harb, a 365-day solar calendar, measured the seasons and the agricultural year. Together, they formed the calendar round, a vast spiral of time that repeated every 52 years, an eternity within eternity. And beyond even that was the long count, a timeline stretching across millennia, used not to record kings or wars, but creation itself. While the modern world celebrates the leap year for keeping our clocks accurate, the Maya didn't need one. Their system predicted the solar year at 365.242 days, more precise than the Gregorian calendar we use today. Thousands of years before atomic clocks, before telescopes,
They had already mapped the rhythm of the earth and the dance of the stars with staggering precision. But the true beauty of the Maya civilization lies not just in how they measured time, but how they wrote it. Their script, one of the most complex writing systems ever created, was a living synthesis of sound, art, and concept. Each glyph could represent a word, a syllable, or an entire idea. Each was crafted with aesthetic perfection, carved into stone or painted on codices made from the bark of wild fig trees. These were not mere symbols. They were alive. To write was to participate in creation, to echo the gods who spoke the world into being. Their texts recorded not just events, but cosmic harmonies, eclipses, planetary cycles, rituals performed in alignment with the stars. Every mark was part of a conversation between humanity and the universe. When Spanish conquerors arrived in the 16th century, they saw these writings and misunderstood them. In fear of their power, they burned nearly all of them. Libraries of cosmic knowledge turned to ash. Only 4 Maya codices survive today. Yet even from those fragments, the genius of their creators still shines. The Maya believed that time was not something to be escaped, but understood. To live was to exist within a sacred order, a universe where every cycle, every star, every breath had purpose. The gods did not rule from afar. They were woven into the passage of days, into the rise and fall of the sun. And so, when they looked up at the sky, they did not just see stars. They saw the memory of beginnings and the promise of returns, a clock written in the language of light. The Maya were not just keepers of time. They were its interpreters, mathematicians of the infinite, poets of the cosmos. Their cities may have crumbled, their libraries may have burned, but their calendar still turns, silently, perfectly, reminding us that even in the vastness of eternity, humanity once spoke the language of the stars. Beneath the stone cities of the ancient Maya, another world exists, darker, quieter, older, a world of water and echo, where the breath of the earth moves through veins of limestone and light flickers like memory on the surface of still pools. These are the cenotes, sacred sinkholes formed by the collapse of underground caves, opening gateways between the living world and the one beneath. To the Maya, they were not just geological formations, they were doors, entrances to Xibalba, the underworld, where gods, spirits, and ancestors dwelled. If you listen closely near one, even today, the air hums differently. The wind seems to carry whispers. The water reflects shadows that don't belong to the surface. For the ancient Maya, these places were alive. They were bridges between realms, between what can be seen and what can only be felt. Some cenotes were gentle and open to the sky, their waters shimmering turquoise under the sun. Others plunged deep into darkness, caverns lit only by the faint blue light that filters through cracks in the stone. The Maya entered these spaces with reverence, carrying torches, incense, and offerings of jade, gold, and blood. They believed that through these portals they could speak to their gods, to the rainbringer Chak, to the spirits of the dead, and to the very heart of creation. Archaeologists exploring the cenotes of the Yucatan have found altars, human bones, and sacred artifacts resting beneath their depths. Some were offerings to ensure rainfall, fertility, or victory. Others were tributes of devotion or desperation. Yet every item, every fragment, feels less like sacrifice and more like conversation, an exchange between worlds. The Maya believed that life flowed in cycles, that death was not an end, but a turning. The underworld was not a place of punishment. It was a mirror of the living world, a place where balance was restored. Caves and cenotes became sacred because they embodied that truth. They were the earth's own reflection, the spaces where heaven, earth, and the afterlife met. In the great city of Chichen Itza, the sacred cenote served as a direct link to the gods. Pilgrims would travel for days to reach it,
bearing gifts for the unseen. Ceremonies echoed across its limestone rim, chants rising like smoke into the humid air. When objects were thrown into its depths, jade beads, obsidian knives, even human lives, it was not with cruelty, but with awe. To give something to the cenote was to return it to the source, to the womb of the world. Even the caves that wound beneath the temples were shaped into cosmic maps. Some were carved with stairways descending into black water, others aligned perfectly with the rising sun or the constellation of the Milky Way. To the Maya, the stars above and the caverns below were reflections of one another, two halves of the same eternal pattern. To walk into these places is to step outside of time. The air cools, the light softens, and the sound of dripping water becomes a heartbeat. You can almost feel the presence of those who once entered with reverence, the priests, the pilgrims, the dreamers who believed that in the darkness beneath the earth lay the wisdom of the gods. And maybe they were right, because even now, when you peer into a cenote, the surface mirrors the sky. The boundary between worlds fades. Above and below become one. The Maya didn't build their underworld. They discovered it, hidden in the breath of the earth, waiting to be heard. In the Valley of Mexico, where mountains rise like sleeping giants and the air carries the thin breath of eternity, there lies a city older than memory, a place the Aztecs called Teotihuacan, the city of the gods. When the Aztecs first arrived here in the 14th century, Teotihuacan was already ancient, its temples long abandoned, its streets silent beneath centuries of dust. They wandered its immense avenues and stood before its towering pyramids in awe. Who could have built such a place? They could only conclude one thing. This was not the work of men, but of gods. And perhaps in some way they were right. The city stretches across 8 square miles, an architectural masterpiece of impossible order and scale. At its heart runs the Avenue of the Dead, a grand boulevard lined with the remnants of temples and palaces leading toward the Pyramid of the Moon, framed perfectly by the Cerro Gordo mountain beyond. And at its center rises the Pyramid of the Sun, one of the largest structures ever built in the ancient world. Standing at its summit, you can see the valley unfold like a living map. The grid of the city aligned to the stars, the pyramids arranged in cosmic harmony, the streets forming precise geometric patterns that mirror celestial constellations. Teotihuacan was not built randomly. It was designed, a city planned according to the heavens, its every stone placed to echo the rhythms of the universe. Even the orientation of the city defies chance. Scholars have discovered that its axis aligns with the setting of the Pleiades, a star cluster sacred across civilizations, and the movement of the sun on specific days of the year. Its builders were astronomers, mathematicians, and engineers whose understanding of time and geometry rivaled anything seen in the old world. And yet, no one knows who they were. The people who built Teotihuacan left no written record. Their language, their names, their kings, all are gone. What remains are their monuments, vast, enduring, and silent. They carved the city from volcanic rock, raised temples to the sun and moon, and filled them with murals of gods and fire, of serpents that shimmered like flowing rivers of light. At its peak, Teotihuacan was home to over 100,000 people, a cosmopolitan empire that traded obsidian, jade, and feathers across the continent. Its influence reached as far as the Maya lands and the Gulf Coast, spreading ideas, art, and architecture. But somewhere around the 6th century, the fire dimmed. The city fell into chaos. Its temples were burned, its palaces looted, its people scattered. No one knows why. Drought? Rebellion? A shift in faith? The mystery remains buried beneath its stones. And when the Aztecs rediscovered it centuries later, they saw only ruins, colossal, eternal, divine. They gave it its name, Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. But perhaps it wasn't the gods who built it. Perhaps it was humanity, reaching higher than ever before, constructing a city not for kings, but for the cosmos, a mirror of the heavens carved into the earth. Even now, as the sun sets behind the pyramid of the sun, the stones glow with a golden light. Shadows stretch down the avenue of the dead like fingers of time itself. The air feels heavy, ancient, as if the city is still alive, still breathing, still remembering. Teotihuacan remains what it has always been, a riddle in stone, a city without a name, a civilization without a face, an echo that refuses to fade. And as night falls, and the stars appear, the same stars its builders once studied, you begin to understand why the Aztecs believed gods once walked here. Because in Teotihuacan, they still do. In the heart of a vast lake, surrounded by mountains and mist, rose one of the most extraordinary cities the world has ever known, Tenochtitlan. Floating upon the waters of the Valley of Mexico, it shimmered like a dream of stone and gold, its temples reflecting the sky, its streets alive with traders, warriors, and priests. This was the capital of the Aztec Empire, the final echo of an ancient cosmic order. To outsiders, it was a world of beauty and brutality, of unimaginable grandeur and unspeakable rites. But to those who lived here, every stone, every act, every drop of blood had purpose. Theirs was a civilization that believed the universe itself depended on them, that without their faith, the sun would die. At the heart of Tenochtitlan rose the Templo Mayor, a twin pyramid that touched the heavens. It stood at the axis of the world, where the realm of gods met the realm of men. The Aztecs believed the cosmos was a delicate balance, maintained through sacrifice, fed by the rhythm of blood and light. To them, life was not owned, it was borrowed from the gods, and must one day be returned. They called themselves the Mexica, and their mythology told of a world reborn from destruction. According to their faith, we live in the fifth sun, the fifth creation of the universe. The previous four had ended in catastrophe, by jaguars, by fire, by wind, by flood. The fifth sun, they believed, could only endure if nourished by the lifeblood of humanity. To offer a human heart was not cruelty, it was cosmic duty, a renewal of the bond between heaven and earth. At dawn, the priests would ascend the temple steps in robes of brilliant feathers. Drums thundered like the pulse of the world. Below, thousands gathered, not in horror but in reverence. When the obsidian blade rose toward the sky, it caught the sunlight and flashed like a star. For that moment, the gods and the people were one. To the Aztecs, sacrifice was creation. The gods themselves had bled to form the world, and so humanity must bleed to sustain it. Every ritual, every offering, every ceremony of fire and song was part of that divine equation, a living prayer that kept the universe in motion. And yet, beneath the grandeur lay a strange tragic beauty. The Aztecs lived with the certainty that the end would come, that the fifth sun too would fall. Their empire was built not in arrogance, but in defiance of inevitability. Every temple they raised, every battle they fought, every offering they gave was a declaration of survival, of faith against time itself. To modern eyes, their world seems drenched in darkness, but to them, darkness was sacred. The night sky was the cloak of their gods, and each dawn was proof that their devotion had worked, that the sun had risen once more. When the Spanish arrived, they saw only blood and gold, and they called it savagery. But what they could not see was the philosophy behind it, a worldview so intertwined with nature, death, and rebirth that even destruction had meaning. Today,
Tenochtitlan sleeps beneath the streets of modern Mexico City, its temples buried but not forgotten. And yet, when the sun rises over the valley, its light still touches the same horizon, still crosses the same sky the Aztecs once prayed to keep alive. Because for all their fear, their rituals, and their sacrifice, the Aztecs believed in one thing above all: that the universe was alive, fragile, and sacred, and that as long as the sun rises, their faith endures. Far to the north, beyond the jungles of the Maya and the temples of the Aztecs, lies a quieter landscape. Rolling plains, deep canyons, rivers that carve their way through stone. Here too, civilization once stirred. Here too, people built cities, raised monuments, and looked to the stars with wonder. But their stories are softer, carried in whispers of soil and silence. This is the Lost North, a chapter of ancient America few remember. From the massive earthen mounds of Cahokia to the sandstone dwellings of the Anasazi, this land once echoed with the rhythm of life, of trade, of ceremony, of dreams. And though their voices have faded, their footprints remain, faint but eternal. In the heart of the Mississippi Valley, near what is now St. Louis, rose Cahokia, a city so immense it defied belief. Around 1,000 years ago, it was home to tens of thousands, a metropolis of plazas, pyramidal mounds, and wooden temples. At its center towered Monk's Mound, a massive earthen pyramid built by human hands, larger at its base than the Great Pyramid of Giza. From its summit, priests watched the sun rise over the Woodhenge, a ring of timber posts aligned with the solstices, marking the calendar of the heavens. Cahokia was a city of astronomers, artists, and farmers. Its people traded copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf, obsidian from the Rockies. They built with earth instead of stone, yet their architecture carried the same purpose: to link human life with the sky. And then, without warning, they were gone. No invasion, no collapse of empire, just disappearance. The mounds grew over with grass, the temples rotted into soil, and the people drifted into myth. Perhaps climate changed. Perhaps the land could no longer sustain so many. Or perhaps, like all great civilizations, they simply reached their silence. Far to the west, the Anasazi, or the ancestral Puebloans, carved their homes into the cliffs of the desert. In the red canyons of Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon, they built worlds of stone suspended between heaven and earth. Their cities were geometric wonders, spirals carved into rock that mirrored the movement of the sun, walls aligned perfectly to the solstices, kivas that echoed with the chants of those who spoke to the unseen. When the rains came, they thrived. When the droughts arrived, they endured. And then one day, they too were gone. The doorways stand empty now, their rooms filled with dust and silence. Only the wind moves through them, the same wind that once carried smoke from their hearths, laughter from their children, songs from their ceremonies. We like to believe civilization is permanent, that progress never fades. But the Lost North reminds us otherwise. These were not primitive societies. They were thinkers, builders, dreamers, humans who shaped the world in harmony with nature, not in defiance of it. Their absence isn't a failure. It's a lesson. Even in their silence, the land remembers. The mounds still rise like gentle hills across the plains. The cliff dwellings still cling to their red stone homes. The carvings still mark the turning of the sun. Every shadow, every ruin, every line in the earth whispers the same truth. Nothing truly disappears. It only changes form. Stand on a high ridge at dusk, and you can almost hear it. The faint echo of drums, the murmur of wind through wooden posts, the hum of lives once lived in rhythm with the world. Civilizations fall, but memory lingers, and in the wide silence of the north, the earth itself still speaks for them,
softly, patiently, like a song fading into eternity. The echoes of these civilizations fade into silence, but their spirit lingers. In the soil, in the stars, in the quiet rhythm of the earth itself. We walk upon their memories every day, though we rarely stop to listen. From the jungles of the Maya to the deserts of the Anasazi, from the temples of gods to the mounds of the forgotten, every stone, every carving, every footprint is a message. A reminder that we are not the beginning of history, merely its continuation. Their worlds may have fallen, their names may have vanished, but their stories still breathe beneath our feet, waiting for us to remember. And if these echoes moved you, if you too feel that strange pull of wonder, then don't let it end here. Because the more we search, the more the earth reveals. So stay curious, stay awake, and join us as we uncover the next great mystery of our world. Like the video. Share it with those who still listen to the whispers of time, and subscribe to Mysteries of Earth, where the past is never dead. It's only sleeping beneath the surface of our world.